We cannot sit in our office and study and whatever. Of course, we do that as well, but we need to go out. We need to participate in this whole blockchain community. And honestly, what is very new to me, especially the younger person in my team, how enthusiastic they are about it. So if there is a hackathon, for example, organized, whatever, they never come to me and say, hey, Jan, can I go there? Can I get some money for that? They just go. You know, they're so interested. They just go and participate and share what they learned, and we have further discussion. And I believe this is really a new way also for us how we deal with this kind of new technology. We are really in the middle of it. Nobody tells us what to do. It's really we together shaping, let's say, what the ambition, what we stand for in the end for blockchain.
We need to be much more technological. We need to have an awareness of how something is programmed in order also to check if the programming is correctly or not. So these might be a kind of capabilities that at the moment we have, but not in the way that it's needed for the future. So I think in the future you always need to have a kind of IT or technological link to the things in order to understand them. Otherwise you always need your IT guy sitting next to you, helping you in the understanding of the problem.
This is not something that's going to impact one or two industries. It's going to affect every industry in the same way that the internal combustion engine affected almost every industry, the same way the internet affected almost every industry, the way the steam engine created new industries. So this is one of those big generational technology shifts that will require a concerted and focused response. Otherwise, you'll miss the boat.
And I think we are all also in the financial service industry trying to recognize that we don't have to be defensive of that, but we rather have to embrace not just this technology, but this enabler that it brings us to actually access a vastly underutilized or undiscovered market that we have to really do business with on an eye-to-eye level.
We talk to all sorts of senior executives in financial services, and often we talk to them and they'd say, well, we've looked at Bitcoin, we've had smart people come in and explain to us how the blockchain works, but I still just really don't understand what it means for my business. And I think that makes sense in a way, because if you think about an iPhone, for example, what's really important when a new iPhone comes out? Is it that there's some new chipset, or they have some new way of compressing frequencies? I'm not an engineer. I don't know how any of that works. What matters to people is what they can do with the technology.
Of course, success is in no way guaranteed. One day we may look back on this and say, oh, wasn't that great? But if you ask me, I think there's undoubtedly a huge amount of progress that has already been made, and there's something here. I find it hard to believe that I'm going to look back in 10 or 20 years and say, oh, none of this ended up happening, because we're really seeing a new way of transacting value on the internet.
I know how big financial institutions work. First of all, they're not going to run out and do something reckless with technology. This is people's money and livelihood that they're working with, right? So these are slow upgrade processes. These systems, once they get implemented, will run in parallel with the old systems for a while before you have a switch over to the new one. That's standard in technology upgrades. So I knew this was going to take time. But yes, sure, there are antagonists. There are players who are threatened by their business model. It's the AT&T, Verizon, Kodak analogy again. Their business model is threatened by this. And of course, they're going to do things to try to slow down and water down the transformational networks that are being developed. And so there's a game theory approach to how the technology is being rolled out in the markets for sure.
We made different roundtables here in Zug after the start of this Bitcoin experiment. And for example, we invited banks which are living here in Zug, people from Zug, bankers from Zug, and we tried to connect them with people of the Zug crypto valley. And okay, they have been talking together, but these bankers were not so very happy. Okay, they said there are different things with law, and it's not so easy for us. But it's also a question of attitude. I think it's the same thing as for our city, for our administration. The banks have to get ready. And I know that in a way they are defensive, but on the other hand, they have, in research, they have made teams which face these questions. And maybe they are waiting a little bit now, but they can't deny it, I'm sure.
I think there's going to be a lot of disruption, a lot of revolution with respect to blockchain-based technologies. And what that's going to drive is not necessarily banks worrying about other banks being competitors. What banks worry about is the bank of one. You know, the next generation of a banking network that's resident on a phone, that's decentralized, that's distributed, and is based on a digital token, a digital asset that's not necessarily issued by a bank or a government or anybody else. So it creates all these different permutations and opportunities, not only for enterprises and governments, but also for society.
We see a lot of examples of banks and consulting companies and other big four audit firms talking about how they can strip cost out of the business of, I don't know, trading in public markets or, whatever it might be. But if you take the example of public markets, how can you cut cost out of a market that doesn't exist in the future? What if the trading of securities happens peer-to-peer in the marketplace that doesn't have the traditional intermediaries of exchanges and brokers and agents and escrow agents and clearinghouses and all these other parties that we rely on? That's the cost you're cutting out, but what if the market can function without them? So the important thing for big leaders of big companies is not just to think about cost, but also to think strategically. What can this technology enable me to do that I wasn't able to do in the past?
I think it's going to take a long time for it to weave its way into the system. It may take a normal tech upgrade cycle for it to fully weave its way into the system, but I've said publicly, I think within 20 years, that financial services will be just software. And the smart contracts technology in particular is going to automate a lot of the things that institutions and people handle today.
74% of the world's population, according to the World Bank, does not have access to basic financial services. In my home country, in the United States of America, which is one of the most wealthiest countries in the world, about 50% of the population does not have access to basic financial services, including bank accounts. There's a huge amount of people around the world that don't get to experience and be a part of the global economy because they don't have access to the financial system for a variety of reasons. I do think this technology will lift a lot of people out of poverty, but will also be an inclusive technology that allows more people to engage in global commerce.
You know, I don't like to think that we're creating so much prosperity for the less than 1%. I like to think of purpose-led businesses. And by the way, that's the trick, I think, for large corporations, is to understand that the cost efficiencies of embracing this new technology will potentially widen their accessible markets at a cost that's reasonable. And that in itself will create prosperity in different areas. Something that I think we should think about.
Pretty soon, when smartphones